and you are listening to the Sirens of Audio.
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio. My name is Dwayne. We are the podcast who love everything to do with audio, and I'm joined as always by Philip. G'day Philip.
G'day Dwayne. G'day everyone. Great to be here as always.
It is very good to be here. You're still in Sydney at the moment. I'm sitting in the wilds of South Australia somewhere. I don't even know where I am. It's all dark outside, and I'm still on my journey around Australia, slowly making my way back to Tasmania. It's a lot colder down south than I'm used to. That was a bit of a shock. How are things going over there in Sydney for you?
Well, we've had some hot days. It's been a bit cooler. It's going to get hotter again. So beautiful spring. It's cool in the morning and night, but lovely during the day. So enjoying the weather at the moment.
And that's exactly what listeners of the Sirens of Audio want to know. They want to know about the weather everywhere. So that's really good. What have you been listening to lately? We'll get to some recommendations later, but is there anything that has stood out to you in the last week or two?
Well, I've been catching up a bit with my Torchwood. So last month I've been listening to, well, it came out last month, Torchwood Soho. So I've listened through that and just loved that, and also the monthly release from last month, and then Ex Machina for this month. So it's, just catching up with some Torchwood, really enjoying those monthly series in particular, I think, are just ideal. I'm loving the fact that the feel keeps changing from one to one, so that's been great.
And Ex Machina was written by Alfie Shaw, so was he a winner of a short story competition a few years back?
I think he was. I think that's how he came about, and he now looks after the short trips. So he's the main one responsible for that. But this is the first time he's written for Torchwood, and he really has he's put a great one out of the bag. I always love Yanto as a character. He's kind of the Hamlet, part tragic, but also comic, and he's got so many elements. And it's interesting because it all starts and just isn't making sense because Cardiff, they keep talking about Cardiff being a hole and deserted and et cetera, et cetera. And as the story goes on, you realise it really is. It's almost a lockdown story because there's just nobody in Cardiff, and the whole puzzle is trying to work out, well, where is everyone? How has a whole city of people managed to disappear? Why does Yanto think he's the only one that works at Torchwood? And he gets to be the hero and work out the whole puzzle. So it's a great story, worth listening to.
Very good. Hasn't Wales just gone into lockdown? Did I notice that on the news?
I think all of England's in trouble at the moment. So we might hear a bit more in a moment when we speak to our guest.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what I've been listening to is some of the things that you've been recommending, because you've been listening to a lot of the recent releases. I've started listening to the Beneath Summerfield Volume 6, is it? Volume 6? So that's very good. But the one I listened to and finished today was Missy, Series 2, which I know that you had a lot of affection for, and it had some great performances with Michelle Gomez, Rufus Hound. But I thought the standout performance today for me, when I heard Too Many Masters, was Helen Goldwyn playing the Empress Maul. I thought she was spectacular in that role. I didn't even know it was her because I didn't look at the cast list before I started listening. And I got the shock of my life when I found out that it was her playing that at the end of it. Do you recall that performance?
I do. Helen Goldwyn is always amazing, but I often have to look her up. If she's speaking her proper received pronunciation, I can pick her, but so often she's playing characters I've got no idea who she is until I check the cast list out.
I know she often gets asked to do a lot of wild tracks and things, and especially since lockdown, she often gets her husband and her kids racing into the room asking if she's okay. So I think that's pretty funny. I often see her tweeting that the kids came in and asked if she was okay because she was doing a death scene or something like that. So, yeah, good on you, Helen Goldwyn. She's always kicking some great goals for Big Finish.
Well, I've been listening to her today because following your recommendation, I managed to get hold of the Tomorrow People. So I've listened to the first 2 episodes of that. So I'm enjoying her in that as well.
Excellent. It's a fantastic series. It's such a shame that it's unavailable to obtain if you haven't heard it before, unless you're getting second-hand copies from somewhere. Okay, so we've got a bit of a different theme. We're not looking at audio drama today so much as audio music. Tell us a bit about what's coming up in a moment.
Well, one of the important things about Doctor Who is always the music behind what's going on, the soundtrack music, and one of the last of the composers of the classic series was Dominic Glynn. And so Dominic's been releasing a few remixes of some of his work, and I happened to pick up on some of them a couple of months ago, started listening, commented, and he got back to me. And so I've been chatting with Dominic Glynn, and he's agreed to come on and talk about what he's been doing with Doctor Who music. So, looking forward to hearing him and all his background to what he's been doing, and he's going to be a pretty exciting guest to have on.
Excellent. Let's listen to a bit of a sample of some of his remixes that he's got up online, and I'm sure you can purchase hard copies too. But we'll listen to a bit of a sample of one of those, and we'll come back with Dominic Glynn.
Smell the blood on the wind. Hear the blood in your ears. Run, run, run. Run beyond the horizon. Run beyond the horizon and catch your hunger.
So, first, I just want to thank you, Dominic, for being here. It's great to chat with you. I just want to start off, you're obviously have a passion for music, how did you get involved in music in the first place?
Well, I sort of came from a musical family in the sense that my mother taught piano to children, and that's a sort of like it's a sideline that she did. And my brother was a pianist, and he still is. In fact, he's a piano teacher. And we were always surrounded by music growing up, and so I just grew up with a love of music, really.
What instruments do you play?
Well, let's go for instrument. Because aside from a brief period where I experimented with the violin when I was about 12, it's really keyboards only for me. I've tried other instruments and I've never got on with anything else. So I'm a keyboard player, and everything is done via the keyboard, basically.
Can I just ask what music you were influenced by as a younger person? What were some of your musical influences out there?
Wow, so wide, really. I mean, I was always a big fan of TV and film music, actually. So that was always a big thing early on in my life. I always wanted to write something like the theme to The Persuaders or Department S, or one of those sort of drama thriller series of the 60s. I used to love that music. And then, of course, the Bond movies, or John Barry's music for that. That was all a big influence on me. And then as I got a bit older, I got into my sort of progressive rock, going into the early 70s. My sister got me into Pink Floyd and stuff like that, Tangerine Dream. And then as I got a bit older, I got into 80s music and started a band, which is a kind of 80s pop synth band. And then a bit later on in the 90s, I was heavily into techno and sort of underground electronica. And then I made a lot of the underground electronica tracks as well. So it was a kind of, depending on the decade, I was into all sorts of different stuff. And now it's all kind of amalgamated into one big blurry mess that I come up with now.
So that's great. So in terms of, let's talk a little bit about your Doctor Who credentials, because lots of people are interested in that. So you were quite, actually, firstly, I think happy birthday for a couple of days ago. So you just had a
Sunday,
birthday. So how are you going in lockdown? Are you celebrating? What's happening with you? Did you ask that?
Out of lockdown, we've still got restrictions going on here, but we're not sort of locked in. And when we were, I was pretty okay, because obviously working in my own home studio, I work from home anyway. So it was more personal things, like the lack of contact with the family and everything. As far as work went, in the lucky position of being a composer who works from home, it wasn't too bad.
What part of the country are you in?
So we are in the sort of top of the southeast, which is Cambridgeshire. We're sort of in the middle, basically. We're about 90 miles north of London.
Right. Okay. So how close to Market Harbour are you?
Not that far, actually. Yeah, that's a bit further northwest, I think, from us. But yes, not that far away. Yeah.
Okay. I have a cousin in Market Harbour, so that's a place I love going to when I get the chance.
Okay, yeah, not that far away. We're about 3/4 of an hour, 40 minutes away from Cambridge.
Yeah, beautiful place. So in terms of Doctor Who, how did you first make a connection and end up writing music for Doctor Who? Because you were very young.
Yeah, well, I grew up watching it, loving Doctor Who, and as a child, it was my favourite programme and all that kind of stuff. And then I was in the band. I was talking about 80s pop band, and then that kind of like petered out a bit, didn't really go anywhere. But I'd already figured out that I really wanted to make a living out of making music. So as a synthesizer player, which is kind of what I was at that point, I just looked at other opportunities for synthesizer playing, and where could I earn a living doing that. And there was a TV program on called Doctor Who, which had a lot of synthesizer music in its soundtrack. So I thought I'll write a letter, naively, I'll write a letter to the producer of Doctor Who, and he'll give me a job. And so I naively sent off a letter to the producer of Doctor Who, and he naively gave me a job. Basically, there was a little bit of an intervening period where he asked me to send demo tapes, which I did. But by and large, I'm sort of compressing that story. But that's what happened. I wrote him a letter. He wrote back and said, show me what you can do. And I sent him a couple of cassette tapes of, my ideas of how I thought Doctor Who music could sound. And then he offered me the job. There was a little intervening gap because it got taken off the air for a year. during Colin Baker's time, as you probably know. And I think I was going to be working on the show just before it got taken off. So there was a pause, but pretty much it was around just before season 23 that John offered me the job.
So had you done much composition before that?
No. Well, only I'd written for the band I was in, and I had done a little bit of experimenting with music for corporate video, which, a friend of mine worked for a company called Rent-A-Kill that as I always say, they exterminate rats. And I think that's what John Nathan Turner liked, is I'd written a bit of music, literally like old time 1920s style, going into the studio, watching the film on a screen, and then me playing my synth and coming up with the soundtrack that they recorded at the time. And one of those films, the training film or whatever, won some award. I can't remember what the award was now, for corporate video work. And I sent that to John Nathan Turner amongst the other things I sent in. And I think he later said in an interview that was one of the things that he liked, the fact that I'd exterminated rats. He thought I'd probably be quite good with Daleks. So. Although I never did a Dalek story, which is unfortunate.
It's pretty amazing that a producer would actually just hand over to such a young composer with a lot of experience.
I think I was 24 when I wrote to him to start with, and by the time season 23 actually went out, I was 25 when it actually went out to start with, and so I even have been 23 when I first wrote to him, because there was a little gap between them. So yes, I mean, that was the thing about John Nathan Turner. He was really good at giving people a chance, and his philosophy, I think, was that young talent is often the hungriest, and therefore is the most keen to, impress. And so he had a lot of young people doing their first jobs, basically. People like Andrew Cartmel, who'd never script edited before, and loads of his crew were young people, young talent, trying things out for the first time.
So you didn't actually have any. You did. Not only did some incidental music for the show, but John Nathan Turner actually gave you the theme music for the show. So that was a pretty big task. So what were you given a brief as to what direction he wanted to take the theme from? Because it was pretty iconic, the early 80s theme.
First of all, I was never expecting to do the theme. It never crossed my mind. So he actually commissioned me to do the incidental music first. And then after commissioning me for the first 4 episodes, I think, he then came unexpectedly and said, would you like to redo the theme tune? Which, of course, I jumped at the chance. And the brief, I have to confess, although I've always tried to make it a sort of absolute rigid thing, that when you get commissioned to do a job, you follow the brief. I didn't really follow his brief, because his brief was to make a sort of disco version of the theme. And I just thought, that's not going to work. I really don't think, bearing in mind this was the early 80s, and we hadn't really progressed beyond disco as we knew it then, which was, cheesy. And at that point, we'd gone past underground disco, shall we say. And I think his idea was just would have been too cheesy for it. So I said, I tried it. It didn't work. It didn't work. But he didn't seem to mind. He was quite happy with what I came out with. So. And as it turns out, many years later, I did remix them, obviously. And I did do a sort of dance-inspired version, but I wouldn't describe it as discos.
Were you? Did you have a lot of nerves going into such an iconic piece of music? This wasn't something you were just composing. You had to arrange something that had been established for over 20 years. How did you feel going into that?
Trepidation might be a word, but I think as a sort of naive and cocky 25-year-old, I just thought, I'll find a way, and I'll find a way of doing it. But yeah, I was probably more nervous about the reaction, but I don't remember being sort of scared of it. I just remember being, thinking this is a major task. I better not cock this up. And I just sort of got on with it. Also, I had a very, very little time to worry about it, because I think the phone call from John Nathan Turner came very close to when he actually needed it. So I didn't really have time to do anything other than just get on with it and then hope that he'd like it.
Do you remember how you would have, how did you approach it in terms of what you were going to do? Did you lay down everything yourself at home on your synth? How did you actually approach the whole task?
I was woefully under-equipped, music equipment-wise. So previously, stuff had been done at the Radiophonic Workshop, and of course it's stacked full of every conceivable piece of electronic equipment you'd need to make electronic music. And here was, as I say, cocky, naive 25-year-old living in Sussex, in a little house, wanting to make music for television and not having a clue how to do it, somehow convincing the producer of a major TV show that he could put the reins of a TV show like Doctor Who in the hands of me. No idea how I managed to convince him to do it, but I didn't really have a lot of equipment. I had something like 3 synthesizers and a tape machine. And I knew that I couldn't really compete with the magnificent Peter Howell version in the same way. His was just gorgeous. And I thought the only way I can achieve a good result for the Doctor Who theme is to do it very differently and to try and almost go back to it being more kind of lo-fi and try and emphasize the dark, scary side of Doctor Who rather than the mysterious side of Doctor Who rather than the very high-tech version, because I knew that my music equipment wouldn't enable me to sound that high-tech. So I decided to go, like I say, more lo-fi and scary and mysterious, which is, that was the aim for when I did the theme, and I think John understood that. So happily, it got through.
Yeah, it's a lot more minimal than other versions as well, isn't it? So probably a lot more craftworky, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, well, when I was asked to do it, John sent over a reel of tape from each of the previous versions for me to listen to, and I listened to all the previous versions and sort of amalgamated in my brain all the bits I liked about the other versions, and also other music that I liked. Yes, Kraftwerk is a good shout. And I suppose it just all jumbled up in my brain, and I came up with whatever I came up with, really.
By the time you did the theme, had you already done some of the other TV shows?
No, I hadn't. In fact, so although I was commissioned to do the incidental music first, I think the very first thing I had to do for it was the theme. So completely unexpectedly. So the commission came, I was given the scripts, and I was thinking about what I was going to do with the incidental music. And then I think, I'm trying to remember the details of what came when, but I don't think I'd actually started working on the music when the request came to do the theme. So yeah, I hadn't done anything. It was basically my first professional job.
Were you aware of what had been happening with the show in terms of the cancellation, the coming back, the nervousness about it coming back? Was any of that part of what you knew, or were you just so far removed?
We all knew about that because it had been off the air for a year. So I knew that it had been in the news, and it was a big news story. All about saving the Doctor and everything. So I knew all that had happened. And also, as I say, John Nathan Turner had already suggested that he would want to employ me to do the work on the show before it got cancelled. So I thought, hey, I'm going to work on Doctor Who. And then the news came that it had been cancelled. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to work on Doctor Who. So, I was aware of all that. I wasn't aware of the behind-the-scenes shenanigans that were going on while Trial of a Time Lord was being made. That was something I only discovered midway through that season, basically.
Okay, so your first credit as incidental music was The Mysterious Planet. What was the process in terms of writing that music? Was it all filmed first and you were given the information? Were you given a script to start doing some work before any filming?
Yeah, well, I was given the script only as the final demo for John. So he gave me the script of episode 1, the very last thing he needed in order for me to get the approval of him for doing it. Was was writing the music to the opening scene. So the opening scene of Trial of a Time Lord is the big sweeping space vista of this spaceship, and the TARDIS being zapped down inside it. And it was a very expensive model shot, and he wanted a piece of music that would accompany this very expensive model shot. And that was kind of like the test. Could I do that? So I wrote that opening music for Trial of a Time Lord ahead of the shooting of the episode. And then when the episode had been shot, I had to re-record that piece of music that I'd written as a demo because it wasn't fit timing-wise. It didn't fit. So I rearranged it to fit the visuals. But the way of working was always to write to picture. So once the episode had been edited, you'd have a little session with the director and Dick Mills, who did the special sound, and you'd sit around and usually at the Radiophonic Workshop, we go and view the episode and work out where the music was going to go.
I mean, at the time, that was the most expensive scene ever shot in Doctor Who. And certainly it is a mammoth moment. It looks amazing on screen. The sound is fantastic. And then they replayed again a few episodes later.
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I don't know why they didn't use it to death. I think the amount of money they'd spent on it, I'd have used it all over every episode. But yes, it was used in the opening of episode 1 and just a little snippet of it later on somewhere in one of the other episodes. But yeah, it was very expensive, and it was really impressive, and it still looks impressive now.
Yeah. So do you know how much music you actually composed for that first show?
It was, on average, it was usually about 15 minutes usually. I mean, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes. You know, it depended on the episode. It was probably about 15 minutes, I should think, maybe a little bit less.
So that's per episode. So for the 4 episodes, you did about an hour of music?
Probably not far off that. Yeah, that's about right. I mean, they used less music then than they tend to use now. There's music all over every episode of everything now. But there was a lot more. And I'm a big believer in silence, you know, you don't need music everywhere. And I think music is much more effective when it isn't plastered all over every part of the episodes. So, yeah, and it depended on the director and what the director wanted. But, yeah, I mean, as I say, 10, 15, 20 minutes, anywhere in between those levels for the music.
Who actually talks to you about the music? Do you sit down with the director and the producer? Do you just... How much collaboration is there between what you're doing and what people are asking for?
It's the director, not the producer. So, yes, before the thing is shot, you normally have a preliminary discussion with the director who would run through what he has in mind. And some directors would know exactly what they want, and other directors wouldn't have a clue. And you'd have to sort of put your suggestions forward. And, you know, it just depended on who the director was and what the script might have suggested. So some scripts... there might have been discussions just because we wanted to. Like, for example, with Happiness Patrol, I had lots of discussions with Andrew Cartmel and Graham Curry, even though their input actually wasn't crucial at that point because it wasn't their decision about music. But they just wanted to, you know, tell me what they thought because obviously it was close to their heart. And but ultimately, it's down to the director in combination with the composer.
I mean, I guess with the Happiness Patrol, music plays a very pivotal role in the storytelling, probably more so than the other shows you've done. Excuse the harmonica, was that sampled or real?
It was real, but there was an awful lot of problem with it because the actor was supposed to be playing the harmonica, but he actually wasn't a harmonica player and he couldn't play the harmonica. So although we understood when he was booked that he could play the harmonica, we ended up having to get another harmonica player to play the harmonica, not the actor miming to the music because it was written the other way around. So the music guy, the harmonica player, had to in effect play his harmonica to the movements of the actor playing the part, which was really tricky, I have to say. But, you know, the speed at which these shows were made, there was no time to do anything other than that. So you fix, if there's a problem, you find a way of fixing it. So I knew a really good blues harmonica player called Adam Tidy Burney, and he played the harmonica for me. You know, we did our best to make it fit the visuals.
music for Survival's been released on record. Is that the only show that you've had that's been released fully on CD?
On CD, yes. Years ago, in probably 1989 or something, the Doctor Who Appreciation Society put out a tape cassette of the soundtracks to all the previous stories, or most of the previous stories I'd done, I think. But that was quite a rare item, and there aren't very many of them around now, and it was on tape only. So, yes, that's the only full story that's come out. I am told there will be more, but when is not in my area. I don't know when, but it should be coming out. Other things should be coming out.
Will you be asked to contribute to that, remaster it, rework anything, or will they just take what you've got and whack it on?
These sort of releases, I think people like them to be as close to the originals as they possibly can. Without, there'll be some remastering, but Mark Ayres usually does all the remastering for those releases. So Mark will do it, and I don't think they'll need anything else from me. It'll just be a case of releasing the tape. I think Mark's already got copies of all the tapes of everything, so it'll just get remastered to get the best sound out of it all, and out it goes.
Now, your Doctor Who remix was later taken up by Big Finish as used for the Sixth Doctor there. Was that remastered as well, or what was happening with that?
Not by me again. It was remastered. I don't know who did it, but they've done a nice job on it, and it's lovely to get it used so regularly on the Big Finish stuff. And it has, as a result, even though on the TV it was only used for the Trial of a Time Lord series, it's nice that it's now become really associated with Colin as the Sixth Doctor theme. I mean, he calls it his theme now, and that's really nice. It was a short time on TV, but a long life via Big Finish, which is really good.
In terms of other audio work, I've noticed that you've been credited for other TV shows and movies. What are some of the other things you've done? And I did notice that you had a credit for some Red Dwarf. I'm curious to know which series of Red Dwarf your music appeared in.
Yeah, so the vast bulk of my professional work has been production library music, which is music written for TV and film, but not specifically for a particular production. It's written as a library of music that people can grab and put in a production when they need it. And the music for that was used in Red Dwarf, I think it was season 8, quite a lot in season 8 actually, was various cues of music. Funnily enough, one of them featuring Adam Burney, who played the harmonica in the Happiness Patrol. There's some music, I think it's in season 8, where the crew, there's a virus going around the ship and they lose all their clothes. There's a piece of
I know it well.
music in that, with a sort of like it's like a dance track with a harmonica. That was one of mine, and with Adam Burney, as I say, on harmonica.
Hey, what's happened to your sleeve, man? What? Your sleeve? I've noticed that before. My God, they're eating my clothes.
And then there's a few other cues of more sort of drama, wartime music, accompanying various model shots and sort of semi-drama scenes in Red Dwarf. So there's quite a lot in that season of Red Dwarf. But it's also meant that writing that kind of music, you end up with music in the most ridiculous places you wouldn't imagine, which is why I've had music in The Simpsons. Because I hadn't written music for The Simpsons, but when they needed a particular type of music for something, they used something that I'd written, and loads of shows around the world, mostly around the world, not UK based, but a lot of it in America, a lot of it, Germany, Scandinavia, all over the place. You end up with music in films and trailers for films, and it's a very well, it's a very weird job, to be honest, because you often go to see something. You may be sitting in a cinema and something comes on and I go, oh, hang on, I wrote that. And you don't know in advance very often when your music is going to appear in something, particularly in TV. It happens, all the time. You hear something, you're watching something, and it comes on. I might go away on holiday somewhere around the world, and I put the TV on in the hotel, and something comes on, and I've written that music. It's a strange job.
So how does that work with you getting paid for that? Do you just get a royalty coming from that library, but you don't necessarily know where it is, where it's been placed?
You do eventually, because you get the royalty account sheet, which shows you what the track was, how much you've earned from that track, and usually where it was broadcast, what the program was it was broadcast on, or the name of the film. And yes, that's how we get paid as a composer for TV production music and film production music. That's really how you make your money. It's when it gets broadcast, and then you earn performance royalties from it. So it's a strange way of making a living, but it's the more your music gets used, the better off you are, the better you earn.
Is it just a cheaper way for producers to get music, so they're using stock music rather than employing a composer?
Very often it's that. Sometimes it's they will use it in combination with a composer. They might already have a composer, but they need a particular piece of music which is either not in the style that the composer works in, or they need something very fast that's already done. I mean, I'm thinking of it as an example, the series Homeland. I don't know if you've ever seen Homeland.
Yep.
I've got a bit of music in Homeland only because they needed some music of a news, high-tech news theme, for a TV broadcast. And rather than getting the composer who's written the score to go and write a piece of news theme music, they used a piece of news theme music that I'd written. So, it just sometimes it's convenient for directors and editors to just grab a piece of music that's already written, and that's a sort of good case in point, really.
I assume you don't get credit for that, though?
Well, weirdly, you do for movies. You don't get credit usually for TV shows. If you've contributed library music to a TV show, I think partly because the credits would go on for hours. If everybody got credited in TV, in films, they do go on for hours. So, they do tend to give you a credit if you've had a piece of production music in a movie.
So while you were composing for Doctor Who, did you start getting other work at the same time, or was it after?
Yeah, I did. I mean, Doctor Who sort of led on to some other work with the BBC, which a lot was sort of education TV, schools TV and education stuff. But almost as soon as Doctor Who finished, or around about the time Doctor Who finished in 1989, I got offered my first library album, which was a album of music, a whole album of music for TV, which was and it was called Night at the Movies, and it was basically the theme for that album that they commissioned was music in the style of famous films. So I got the chance to write music that was a bit like Jaws and a bit like Star Wars, and and was sort of in the style of major composers, which taught me. I can't tell you how much it taught me, because I don't read music, and everything I do by ear. So I had to listen to John Williams, for example, and think, how the hell did John Williams write the Star Wars theme, and what did he use, and what sort of instruments did he use? And I just had to listen to it over and over again until I could figure out how it was done, and try and do a sort of rough copy. Is that the word? In those days we did a lot of that sort of stuff. They don't do
homage.
Thank you. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. But they wanted, and very often that stuff would get used in parodies of things. So there'd be a comedy show about Star Wars or something, and then they'd use a bit of music that sounded a bit like it, or adverts. I mean, loads of adverts would use stuff that was reminiscent of Jaws, but not actually Jaws, or the Bond films, all that kind of thing. Great fun to do, and I say it taught me loads. But that was the first production library album I did, and then I haven't stopped doing them since, really. Fortunately.
So you still don't read music?
No.
So
I can look at some music and say, well, that's A and that's C sharp, but I can't actually read. I start looking at a book and saying, well, that's A and that's B, and I can see that's a Z, but actually putting it together into words is a whole different ball game.
So how do you notate your music for other musicians to be able to play? Or is it just you
Well,
lay it all down as all your work?
If I am working with other musicians, and yes, fortunately I do get the opportunity sometimes from time to time to work with orchestras and things, you have to do it's a combination of using the computer, because I write on the computer, I write on the keyboard. The computer program will notate everything that I write automatically. It's not very good at doing it, I have to say. So you get an approximation of it with the computer, but it doesn't necessarily write it down in a way that, say, a violinist would comfortably play. There'd be a lot of frowning and a lot of stopping and starting as they look at the manuscript and saying, "Oh, that's not right," But it does it in a way, in a form. So if I'm working with a string quartet or something, I can get away with using a combination of the computer's notation and showing it to somebody who does read and say, "Look, is there anything wrong with this? Can you just look at this and say, is it going to work?" And they'll go, "Yeah, no, that's fine. They can play that, no problem." If it's a bigger score for an orchestra, then I will then work with an orchestrator who will convert the MIDI score that I've written into a notation score, and they will do it in such a way that it's comfortable for people to play, and that the bar indicators are in the right place, and various technical issues that I would probably miss.
I was listening to your show reel earlier today, and was really impressed by some of the big orchestral scores that came out. So, I mean, I know you more electronically, but there was some beautiful orchestral work that you've done for some other shows and some other themes. I thought that was just big and powerful stuff as well.
Oh, thank you. Well, a lot of that actually is all actually done on the keyboard. So it's amazing how incredibly good keyboard technology has become, sample technology and everything. So there's a lot of mock-up orchestra stuff. In fact, on my show there's a lot of mock-up orchestra stuff. So depending on what you heard, it may have been real or it may have been fake.
Right, I'm not sure now. You've thrown me. I have to go listen again.
Can I just pick up on the real harmonica, which Philip and I were debating before you came on, Dominic, and I suggested it may have been sampled, but you said it was real. Another instrument from one of your shows, Survival, was the electric guitar. That was a real guitar you were using in there too. So you are a keyboard player, but you're quite happy to go in and use these real instruments when necessary. Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, I think it always brings it to life a bit to. Unless you want a very, very sort of stark electronic sound, which is perfectly good as well. Yeah, but for something like those episodes, Survival particularly, and Happiness Patrol, I've sort of pushed to have a real player. I mean, I think Happiness Patrol really needed to have a real player because the character was playing. To be honest, he was supposed to be playing the harmonica. So I didn't want it to sound artificial. I didn't want to use a sample of somebody playing the harmonica because it would have sounded artificial. Harmonicas are one of those instruments. It's very difficult to get a very believable sample of a harmonica. So there was never any question really. We had to get a player in for that. With Survival, it was kind of a request of the director. He wanted a score, particularly for the Alien Planet. He wanted a score that sounded a bit reminiscent of something from Dire Straits that he played me. And I thought, well, again, guitars are not brilliantly reproduced by keyboards. Certainly in those days they weren't. So it just seemed obvious to get a guitarist in. And I've always been interested in mixing electronics with real instruments, whether it's orchestra or just soloists. And I think it worked. As it turned out, worked quite well. Because having a guitarist there meant I could use him in different ways. I could use electric guitar for the Dire Straits style rock stuff that the director had asked me to do for the Alien Planet. But I could also use acoustic guitar for the kind of horseback shots where it kind of was reminiscent of a spaghetti western or something, and it just gave the soundtrack a unique identity, I think.
And I think the electric guitars really fit the cat theme well as well in that particular story, with the screechy sound you can get out of the guitar. And I should apologise. I said you use real instruments, not that a keyboard is not a real instrument.
I know what you mean.
That.
You could say acoustic. Yeah, no, I know what you mean, and you're right there. I mean, it's absolutely right. You know, the actual air moving from an acoustic instrument can really bring to life something that otherwise might sound a bit sterile.
Yep. Can I just move forward a few years to something that I noticed last week? Big Finish was promoting the B7 Media production of Blake 7, A Rebellion Reborn. And I noticed that you and two other composers worked on those episodes for the music. How did you get involved with that project?
It's a good question, actually. How did I get involved? Well, I knew Andrew Sewell from. How did I know him? I'm trying to think how. I can't remember how I knew him. I knew various people. So I knew Ben Aronovich, who'd written some of it, and I'd obviously met Andrew a few times before, and I can't remember where we'd met, but. You know, he just asked me if I'd do it, and I thought, well, I couldn't miss out on an opportunity to work on Blake 7 as well as Doctor Who, so I kind of jumped at the chance, and it was great to get a chance again to do some big orchestral scores. So that's a good example, actually. The Blake 7 stuff I did was quite an orchestral sound, which is I think what they wanted for that stuff, to sound like a movie. They wanted it to sound like a movie. So I thought, well, I'll give a movie soundtrack music, and so it was a good opportunity to experiment with the samples, the orchestral samples, and try and turn it into an epic score.
What have you been doing lately? What are you doing at the moment?
I've done a few things recently. So I've done an album of Scandi noir thriller music, designed to be used either in a parody or in a real Scandi noir thriller, depending on who needs it. Sort of dark, moody drama, murder mystery music. I have just done, well, I'm in the middle of an album now, which is going to be not orchestral, but a small group of players, probably string quartet and maybe some woodwind, stuff like that, and keyboards. And it's kind of drama stroke comedy music, again, for more high-end arts and culture type TV. What else have I been up to recently? Oh, I've just done a film. Well, I've just done a film, documentary called Flint, which is about the water poisoning crisis in Flint, Michigan, which has been going on for years and is quite a scandal. And the film has been documenting what's been going on in Flint, and that hopefully will be out next year. And it's made by the same director, Anthony Baxter, who I've worked with before. We've done some films about some of Donald Trump's nefarious activities. A film called You've Been Trumped and You've Been Trumped Too. And also A Dangerous Game. So 3 movies, actually. And he's a fantastic filmmaker. So I do quite a lot of work with him as well.
Flint, Michigan certainly gets a lot of attention on it for various trials that happen in that place. A lot of things happen there, don't they? We've got Michael Moore, who's obsessed with the place, plus lots of other things seem to happen there too. Yeah,
exactly. And it's a very poor city, and so you can bet your life if some terrible things are going to go down, they're going to go down in a poor place rather than the wealthier areas. And so Michigan, or particularly Flint, does have its fair share of problems, and it's a terrible tale, actually. But it's well worth seeing if you get a chance to see it when it comes out.
Which countries tend to use your music the most? Because you seem to have a lot of Scandinavian connections.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is down to where the publishers are particularly effective in their communications with TV and broadcasters and everything. I mean, probably America, Germany, Scandinavia, Japan. It ends up in all sorts of places, to be honest. And I can write for different publishers. When you write production library music, you're writing for a publisher, and they distribute the music around the world. And the different companies will have better relationships with other parts of the world, different parts of the world. So I might write for one company and they get lots of stuff in America, on TV in America. Another company might be really good with Japan and the Far East and maybe Australia or something. It just depends who you've written for, and and also the type of music that you're writing. The thing about production library music is it's every kind of music. So it doesn't matter whether you're writing drum and bass, or you're writing 1920s trad jazz, or you're writing avant-garde string quartet music. It's all there in library music, because somebody somewhere needs that kind of music and they need it now. And so that's where library music comes into its own. It's already done. People don't have to think about it. It's already done. It should be of a very high quality, because that's their aim, is to just only produce high quality, totally instantly usable music.
So you only get paid if it gets used?
Basically, yeah. I mean, some companies do give you something up front, but yes, but your general earnings from it are when it gets used. And so the aim is to write as much music of a high quality as you can, to get it out there and into the world so that people are using it. And, the same piece of music can be used in lots of different places. So you might write a piece of music and it's in an advert somewhere in one country, and it's in a theme to a TV series in another country, and it's in a radio ad somewhere else, and it's in a movie somewhere else. You can get one piece of music can be very successful, and then you can get 10 that maybe don't do so well,
Now, I rediscovered your music again just through finding the Happiness Patrol remix that you did, which I've been playing a lot. My kids are a bit sick of it. What made you decide? And since I've realised, of course, you've done a Gallifrey remix and a Survival remix. What inspired you to do some remixes and get them out there?
Well, so during the 90s, particularly, and the early 2000s, I spent a lot of time doing dance music, and that was kind of my thing that I was doing in addition to the TV stuff. And I had a record label, and that was kind of a big part of my life, was dance music. And a lot of DJs and electronic music artists, as it turned out, were also Doctor Who fans. And I was asked by a number of different DJs and producers if they could have some of my samples from Doctor Who so that they could turn them into tracks. And I sort of put off doing that. I didn't say no to people. I just didn't really give out much to people. And then after a while, I thought, why do people keep asking me to do this? Why don't I do it? Because I make my own dance tracks. Why don't I use some of my samples from Doctor Who? Because I recognised that there were some themes within the incidental music to Doctor Who which I recognised would work as new tracks. And so I just set about doing it. And initially, because I went to Gallifrey in Los Angeles, the convention in Los Angeles, and they wanted me to talk about my work on the theme. And I thought, well, rather than just talk about it, I will do a little presentation. And I'll do a remix of the theme and I'll play it at Gallifrey. And so I did the Gallifrey remix, as it ended up being called, which was my first remix, as opposed to the rearrangement, which is what I did in 1986. This was a complete remix of what I had done in 1986. And as I say, that led me on to thinking, well, the other idea I previously had was to take samples of my stuff and make dance tracks out of it. I'm going to now do an EP. So that's how the first EP came out. It was, first of all, remixes of the Doctor Who theme, and then I followed that up with remixes of incidental music.
Can I just ask, just out of curiosity, was Orbital one of the bands that approached you about the music? Because they obviously came out with a big Doctor Who theme in the early 2000s. Were they one of them?
I mean, I do know Paul from Orbital, and we met at a festival, in effect, in France. We went to a tiny festival in a chateau in a chateau in the middle of northern France. We all went over on a coach, and it was run by a friend of mine, and he put on this sort of alternative electronic music event in a field, in a chateau in front. It was absolutely brilliant, really odd weekend, but fantastic. And Paul was one of the people that came along to the festival, and we just chatted over, because I was doing some DJing, and he said, oh, great, I love what you play and everything. And it came out in that conversation that I used to work on Doctor Who, and he said, you used to work on Doctor Who? I love Doctor Who. And then we had this big long discussion, and he knew my music and everything in Doctor Who. But no, he hadn't specifically, because he doesn't really work with samples. He's a synth guy. But no, there are a number of DJs and producers who I knew from various clubs and stuff who'd asked to take tracks and remix the stuff, but not Orbital.
Just wondering what a day in the life of a composer looks like. What does your usual day look like?
Well, I get up late usually. No, I say that because I do tend to work quite late at night. Most composers I know tend to work quite late at night. I think it's partly because the phone doesn't ring and it's dark and nobody interrupts you, and the dog doesn't need walking, and there aren't loads of things to do. The garden doesn't need looking at, and you can get quiet time to concentrate. So I do a lot of my work at night, but my studio is in my house, which is outside my house in a room above my garage, and I just go in there and depending on what I'm working on at the time, I'm either working on writing something, or I'm working on mixing something, or I'm doing the underscores, which is the versions of the piece of music you've written that needs no melody over the top, or you just need to produce like cut down versions. Sometimes you need to produce a 60-second version of what you've recorded, because they ask for different versions of the same piece of music. There are so many different things you get asked to do. Or I might be working on a film soundtrack, in which case I come in the studio and I've got my computer here and I've got the film on one screen and I've got the music software on the other screen, and I sit in here for a few hours and work on that, and I go and have a break, and then I'm back in there for a few hours, and hopefully at the end of a period of time you come out with an album or you come out with a film soundtrack.
So I'm currently listening to all your albums on Apple Music. Do you actually get paid? I mean, do you actually get looked after with that sort of situation?
Well, I mean, Spotify is a good example. I love Spotify as a user. What's not to love about Spotify? Any piece of music you want to listen to, press a button, da, 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 there it comes almost instantly. You have as a composer or a musician, it's terrible because you do get paid, but I mean it's tiny amount of money. And you look at even Pink Floyd, and they've, I don't know how many million plays of Dark Side of the Moon or something, and they'd earn a tiny amount of money in relation to the number of listens that they'd had. And you certainly couldn't earn a living out of digital downloads or streams of your music on a streaming service. So mixed emotions, really. I use it all the time. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Spotify man because I've had it for years, and I've built up a massive library on Spotify of the stuff I like to listen to. And if ever I'm researching anything, they say, could you ever listen to this? We like this. This is the sort of vibe we want for something. I'm straight onto Spotify. So as regards composers earning money from it, it needs work. They haven't got there yet, and I think there's going to have to be some adjustment at some time, because people can't make a living out of digital streams.
So what's the best way to buy your music to support what you're doing? Well,
that's a very good question. I mean, I actually have very little out there commercially, because most of what I do is commissioned for TV or commissioned as a library album. And the library albums are not for sale. They are for use by producers and directors and everything, and editors. But the small number of commercial releases, like, for example, the Survival soundtrack, best way is to go out and buy the vinyl or to go out and buy the CD, because that does actually filter back to me. I mean, it all filters back to me, don't get me wrong, eventually it does, but it's just the level is quite minuscule from streams, particularly streams.
So you don't have a Bandcamp site or anything like that?
I don't Bandcamp site. No, I don't. I just rely on. I mean, because I say I don't really put out much commercial music. It's all. I used to do when I ran my label No Bones Records, which I did mostly in the 2000s and the late 1990s. That was in the days of vinyl and CD release, and everything was done on a physical basis. But now that's kind of, I don't really have much time to run the label. So the only releases I've really put out have been the Doctor Who releases. And I retained, so I keep the rights to those for digital downloads. I do earn money from that, don't get me wrong. But I also made copies, CD copies, which I only sold at conventions. So to give it a little bit of rarity value, if I was doing a convention in usually in the States, because that's where most of the conventions were, people could buy CD copies of the remixes from me there. But that stuff's really not available in hard format. It's only available digitally. So the remixes, feel free, carry on getting them digitally. Listen to them, stream them, download them. In fact, that's the best thing. Download them from iTunes or something. Actually, that's the best way for me.
Okay, I'm doing that. So that's good.
Great.
Well, if you ever get out to Australia, make sure you bring a bunch of CDs, and we'll find someone to put you up somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. What part are you in? Which part?
I'm in Sydney.
Okay, I've only been to Adelaide. Sorry, I'm not Adelaide. I've only been to Perth. I haven't been anywhere other than Perth. But one of these days, I will get to your part of the world.
Well, I've not been to Perth. Why were you in Perth?
Well, we've got friends in Perth. So my wife was born in Singapore, and we were visiting Singapore, and we've also got friends in Perth. So we did a trip Singapore, Perth, spent a few weeks there. Fantastic.
Well, it's not too far from Singapore to Perth.
No, exactly.
An extra 4 hours to get to Sydney.
Exactly. So we couldn't do one without doing the other. And if you're in Sydney, who's in Sydney? Dwayne, are you in Sydney normally?
I'm in Tasmania myself.
Okay. Well, I was going to say Kev McCulloch is in Sydney. So if you're ever out Sydney way, you better get in touch with him.
Is Kev in Sydney, is he?
Yeah, he lives in Sydney.
Yeah, Kev's done many appearances for the Doctor Who Club of Australia. So,
right.
Well, I haven't been in Sydney for a long time, but that was the only time I saw him in Sydney.
Right. I see Kev every couple of years. We Kev McCulloch, Mark Ayres, Dick Mills, and myself, we go out about once a year or thereabouts and have a Doctor Who composers night out. We usually sit around and have a Chinese in a restaurant and tell scurrilous stories about each other. It's very entertaining.
Do you ever get any twinges towards Kev McCulloch in as far as he did the theme, took over the theme from you after only just 1 year?
Yeah, I hate him. I really hate him. He's such a lovely guy. I couldn't possibly hold a grudge. No, he's a great guy, and I actually really like what he did with the Who theme as well.
More the disco theme, wasn't it? The John Milton.
Yeah, but I like the way he did it, and he did it differently, and every time it's been done differently, which I think is the key to it. Really, I would have liked to have had a chance to keep it going a bit longer, my version, but I understood the reasoning behind wanting to change it, because obviously the whole thing was changing when Sylvester made sense.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. Love hearing about what happened in the past. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
It's been great. You're welcome. Good to speak to you both.
Well, what a lovely fella Dominic Glynn is. That was fantastic.
Yeah, learned so much about what he was doing. I love the fact he was so young, but just so confident in what he was doing, because I think a few years later, being given the whole Doctor Who theme to rewrite, he'd have been terrified 10 years later. But
it probably would have been.
23, 24, didn't even bother him. Just, loved it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Great to get that insight and a little bit of a change from our usual audio drama theme. But speaking of audio dramas, have you got any that you want to recommend? I don't think you do this week, have you, Philip?
Well, you know what? I've mentioned already with the interview. I think what I want to recommend people listen to is get Dominic Glynn's remixes. In the past, I think I recommended a month or two ago the Happiness Patrol one, but also the Ravalox collection and the Gallifrey remixes. Those two remixes, just have a listen to what he's done. It won't be to everyone's taste. It's very electronic. It's a bit dancey at times, but I do love the way he's sampled. You've got doctors' voices in there. You've got lines from the shows as well as instruments. You've got the harmonica and just lots of stuff happening. Just download them with your iTunes, your Apple account or whatever. Give them a bit of money by downloading them, but they're worth listening to, and see how you enjoy them.
I've been listening to those on Spotify, but after that interview, I feel bad now for listening to them on Spotify. But they are there. If you want to try before you buy, you can do it. But it certainly is worth grabbing hold of. What I'd like to recommend is, well, first of all, can we just say thank you to Rob and David at the Doctor Who show for giving us a nice shout out the other day. They did a show on the Sirens. So check out the latest edition of the Doctor Who show. But what I would like to recommend, it was mentioned in the interview too, and it is related to Dominic Glynn, is the fact that in the last week, I think it was last week, Big Finish, have you noticed Big Finish have been doing all these specials every week? There's something new. Well, last week, their special...
free, it's fantastic.
Yeah, their special was a release of a download. Well, a few weeks ago they did the whole Davros as a bundle, a download bundle, which was really cheap and it's a really good thing to have because Terry Malloy in that is just fantastic. But last week they had all the Blake 7, what are they called? A Legend Reborn, Blake 7, A Legend Reborn. And when they first came out, because it's Blake 7 recast and redone as audio, produced in conjunction with Big Finish and B7 Media. Years ago when they came out on CD, I bought the first few and I sort of listened to those, thought they were fantastic, and didn't realise that there was actually 10 of them. And you can buy all of them from Big Finish. Last week they were on special for $10. But it's gone off special now, but they're still incredibly cheap. If you you can get all 10 episodes as a download bundle for $20. So it's a fantastic set to have. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's got some big names, like Benedict Cumberbatch is in it. And if you like, I think even Michael Keating's in it. Jan Chappell is in it. Michael Keating, I think...
Colin Solomon?
Yeah, I think Michael Keating's still playing Villa. I think he was the one member that wasn't recast. I think. I could be wrong. It's been so long since I've heard it. But now that I've got that download bundle, I can go back and listen to all 10 because there's 6 or 7 episodes I haven't heard. So I'm really excited about that.
B7 Media presents Blake 7, The Audio Adventures, Season 1.
In the 23rd century, the Galactic Federation was no longer a beacon of democracy and peace. It had become a corrupt tyranny ruled by elite factions who care nothing for the fate of ordinary people. Freedom and justice are things of the past. One man chose to oppose this.
This man is a career terrorist. He will not hesitate to kill you. Forget, and it will be the last thing you ever do.
Yes, sir!
Blue 5.
Blue 5 receiving.
You will go for hard target entry and capture. Acknowledge.
Roger, Tangent, going in now.
Terran Federation versus Citizen Rog Blake.
How do you plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Good evening, Engineer Blake. My name is Servalan. No doubt you know who I am.
When one is getting crucified, it's always useful to know who's banging in the nails.
Rog Blake, you have been found guilty of a series of most heinous crimes.
Blake was just one man.
I have no alternative.
Discredited?
Than to sentence you to deportation.
Friendless.
To the prison planet Cygnus Alpha.
And far away.
For the rest of your natural life.
He's not a threat anymore.
This is the Petizano system. 12 hours ago, we jump in and we find this.
But that's bigger than a battleship.
The derelict is on a collision course with this gas giant here. 9 hours after we rendezvous. Splat. We want you to salvage the derelict.
I can't do it on my own. I need help.
Subject Avon Kerr successfully revived.
Really? How unfortunate for you. Somebody has to steer it and sort out the control integration, and no one person can do all that in 9 hours.
Subject Stennis Jenner successfully revived.
Listen, Blake, I'm a spacer. I'm not interested in Earth.
Helmet's on.
Cycle the lock.
Opening lock now.
Good God.
Tanzig! What was that?
A defensive robot.
Mezin, 2 more behind you! Is that all of them? Mezin? We're so screwed.
Do you have a plan B?
I always have a plan B. Death or freedom? You decide.
Subscribers get more at bigfinish.com.
Confirmed.
But just in conjunction with that, keep an eye out on the Big Finish website, subscribe to the newsletter, because every week they're doing some really good specials, and they're also doing a free episode weekly as well. I think this week just gone, the week we're recording, they've just released the first episode of Gallifrey, which was called Weapon of Choice. They released that as a free download. So you can try that, and then if you like it, you can keep buying the Gallifrey series, which I know, Philip, you would be right behind, because that's one of your favourites, isn't it?
I love the Gallifrey series. So if you listen to that first episode, you'll be hooked. So expect to spend more money after that. But at the moment, they're quite cheap. But yeah, the Gallifrey series is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're my recommendations for this week, and thank you for yours, Philip.
They're great recommendations. Can I just say too, if you're still listening to us, that's brilliant. Why don't you rate and review us? Because we'd love to get some 5-star ratings and some reviews, so that a few more people hear about what we're doing and can hear some of the special guests we're getting.
And we did do a slightly different episode this time, so not dealing with audio drama, but we still deal with audio, talking to one of the composers. So if you have any ideas of people that you'd like us to try and contact to talk to, that you would like to hear from, send us an email, sirensofaudio@gmail.com, and you can find us at Audio Sirens on Twitter, and we're on Facebook as well, so feel free to contact us that way too. Anything else, Philip?
Nope, that sounds fantastic. It's been a great week. Thank you.
All right, listen to lots of lovely audio. You know why. Because audio drama rocks!